Welcome to The Explainer. We're diving right into something incredibly unique today. What we have here is a truly fascinating juxtaposition. On one hand, we've got a real-life, dedicated manual therapist, and on the other, a violent, cinematic, corporate werewolf thriller that reads like a total Hollywood blockbuster. Today's Explainer is going to focus on two main things. First, about the author himself, and second, about the book and its wild story. It's a tale that perfectly merges ancient ninja philosophy, corporate espionage, and primal supernatural horror.
To really understand this story, we have to plunge right into the bleak reality of its main character. Imagine being 21 years old, having lived your entire life as an enslaved orphan in 1996 Lancashire. Our protagonist, Daniel Wilson, lives a life of brutal servitude under the so-called care of Richard Hollins and Elizabeth Byers. But everything just flips upside down when Daniel discovers a dusty cassette tape hidden in a damp basement wall. The voice on the tape? It belongs to his real father, James Wilson. He reveals that Richard and Elizabeth actually murdered Daniel's parents for their wealth, and then he leaves him with this chilling warning. They are not human. They serve the darkness. It's a recording that completely shatters Daniel's reality and lights a roaring fire of vengeance inside him.
But before we go any further down that dark path, let's talk about the author, pulling back the curtain on the architect of this incredible story. The real-life timeline of the author, Zohejan Zakirov, is just as intriguing as his book. He wasn't born in the gloomy hills of the UK. He was born in 1975 in Namagan, Uzbekistan. And get this, he's not even a full-time novelist. He's a passionate amateur writer who has spent the last 33 years mastering manual therapy, astrology, and psychology. Inspired by his psychotherapist uncle way back in 1989, Zakirov has dedicated his life to alternative medicine.
So, you're probably wondering, how does a manual therapist end up writing a bloody werewolf thriller? Well, Zakirov originally dreamed of becoming an actor, wanting to follow in the footsteps of his father who worked at a drama theater for 23 years. Unfortunately, family opposition thwarted those acting dreams. But creative energy has to go somewhere, right? So, he channeled all that thwarted passion into writing intense, dark fiction. He penned several amateur works like My Heart's Dream, Day of War, and Ghost in the Dream. But Blood River, that is the absolute culmination of this creative outlet, just pouring cinematic drama right onto the page.
All right, let's pivot to the story itself and plunge back into that bleak world. It's 1996, and the heavy gray skies of Lancashire are pressing down on young Daniel. He is beaten, bruised, and forced to do all the dirty work for Richard and Elizabeth. Richard constantly degrades him, literally telling him he is nothing but a creature of their making. This relentless physical and psychological abuse is entirely designed to break him. Daniel's everyday reality is this sprawling, heavily guarded mansion. It's basically a gilded cage of oppressive luxury, where he is trapped, scrubbing floors and taking beatings. But remember that tape recording? It absolutely changes the chemistry of his mind. Finding out his parents were murdered doesn't just make him sad, it ignites an unstoppable fire within him. His very first instinct is to grab a knife, march right upstairs, and end Richard's life once and for all. But he gets stopped by a man who recently arrived at the mansion looking for work as a gardener. His name is Hiroshi Kurosawa. Now, Hiroshi is definitely no ordinary gardener. He's actually a secret master of ancient ninja arts. When Daniel begs Hiroshi to teach him how to fight so he can kill Richard, Hiroshi hits him with a cold, hard truth. Learn not for revenge, but for freedom. He makes Daniel realize that simply murdering Richard is a one-way ticket to a British prison. Instead, he puts Daniel through 3 agonizing months of training to forge that blind rage into a calculated weapon. He teaches him to become a shadow.
And this leads right into Daniel's brilliant, terrifying strategy of adaptation. Rather than committing an impulsive murder, Daniel buries his hatred deep down. He decides he's going to destroy Richard's life piece by piece. He infiltrates Richard's massive company, RCI Global, not as a threat, but as the perfect, ruthless corporate heir. He smiles, carries out cruel orders, and completely earns Richard's absolute trust. In fact, Richard is so proud, he boasts to his wife that Daniel has finally been broken into the perfect emotionless successor. Talk about playing the long game.
But appearances are totally deceiving. On the surface, the pristine lobby of RCI Global looks like a beacon of medical salvation. But underneath, down in the underground laboratories, Richard is busy engineering horrific viruses. He isn't trying to cure humanity, he's actually developing vaccines designed to strip people of their free will, turning them into obedient servants. It is literally a bioengineered nightmare hiding in plain sight.
Now Daniel doesn't just sit back and watch. He masters molecular biology and hacks the company's complex systems. He systematically steals control of the entire corporate empire right under Richard's nose. The climax of this corporate espionage hits when Richard is up in his 50th floor office celebrating a brand new virus. Suddenly, his computer screen flashes, adaptation complete, system override by Daniel Wilson. Daniel strolls in, drops the Obedient Son Act entirely, and reveals that all the evidence of Richard's illegal experiments has just been blasted to the media.
Richard just completely loses his mind, and a brutal physical fight breaks out right there in the lab. Amidst all the shattered glass and smashed microscopes, Daniel gets the upper hand, crushing Richard's chest. But as Richard falls, he knocks over a vial containing this glowing, jelly-like green-red liquid. It splashes right into Daniel's face, and he accidentally swallows some of it. As Richard lies dying, he smiles and drops a bombshell. That wasn't a normal chemical. It was the lupus serum, extracted from ancient wolf genetics. He tells Daniel that he now has two hearts beating inside him, one human and one beast.
So now, Daniel faces this terrifying duality. On one side, he's the cold, calculating human corporate infiltrator. On the other, he's the primal lupus werewolf that awakens under the full moon. His bones crack and he transforms into a towering 2-meter beast, but here is the absolute genius of the plot. He doesn't turn into a mindless monster. Thanks to all that ninja discipline Hiroshi taught him, Daniel retains his sharp human mind even while in his wolf form. He uses the beast as the ultimate stealth weapon to finish dismantling Richard's empire.
As the story unfolds, Daniel forms a pretty wild web of justice with some very unexpected allies. He teams up with FBI agent Adam McCartney, a guy totally dedicated to legal justice and taking down Richard's network, strictly by the book. But the investigation into the laboratory anomalies also brings in Dr. Willie Dawn, a world-renowned parapsychologist. Dr. Dawn instantly figures out Daniel's supernatural secret, but instead of turning him in, he protects Daniel's monstrous identity from the FBI, knowing they actually need the wolf's power to stop Richard once and for all.
The trap finally springs when a TV broadcast called Project Enigma airs, completely blowing the lid off RCI Global. Millions of British citizens tune in to watch horrifying footage of the underground human experiments, and man, this triggers a massive, instantaneous police and FBI response. Raids are happening all over the city, and the public is in an absolute uproar. Richard's empire just crumbles overnight, forcing the mastermind to go on the run. But, legal justice isn't quite enough for everyone. Daniel tracks down Bricks. Bricks was Richard's sadistic chief guard, the exact same guy who tortured Daniel when he was a kid. In a visceral, terrifying climax at an abandoned warehouse, Daniel fully transforms into the werewolf. Bricks literally empties his gun into the beast, but the bullets, which aren't silver, just pop right out as the wolf heals instantly. Daniel toys with him from the shadows for a bit before inflicting a terrifying, bloody execution, finally severing the head of his childhood tormentor.
Meanwhile, the mastermind, Richard, is trying to hide out deep in the woods under the totally fake name Barry Box. He befriends a simple hunter named Oliver and hides out in Oliver's heavily supplied underground bunker. But Richard gets outsmarted by his own infamy. Oliver goes home, flicks on the TV, and sees Richard's face plastered all over the news. Furious, the hunter goes straight to the cops. FBI agent McCartney and a SWAT team storm that bunker, capturing Richard in iron chains.
With Richard behind bars and all the evidence safely handed over by Dr. Dawn, Daniel's name is finally cleared. But as he stands there looking out at the full moon, the wolf's blood is still boiling in his veins. Which leaves us with a lingering, provocative thought to take away from this explainer today. When you have literally adapted into a monster to fight monsters, and the full moon continues to rise, where exactly does human justice end and the beast begin? Thank you for exploring this fascinating story with me. And hey, keep questioning the shadows.